Okay, the legal side of towing a car on an A-frame is that we turn your car into a trailer. Therefore, two reflective triangles must be displayed by law. This says that the car is not a car anymore and it's actually a trailer. Two reflective triangles, the lights working from the tow vehicle, only the reg plate of the tow vehicle can be seen, and all four wheels braking means it's now a trailer. That's the loophole in the law that a lot of the European countries don't quite grasp, but it is totally legal in the UK. Therefore, it's legal for you to use this abroad, providing you're a UK driving licence holder, UK registered vehicles, and you're a UK resident. So you can use whatever's legal in the UK as a visitor in a foreign country up to 6 months of the year as a visitor only. So the triangles can be stuck on the inside or reverse. When you've got a blacked out window like this, you can reverse the suction cups over to put them on the outside so they can clearly be seen. We do need to wet the suction cups to make them adhere properly. Find a nice, smooth, suitable area, a bit hard on this vehicle with all the stickering, and press firmly on the suction cups and they do adhere well. So we fit an interchangeable number plate holder. So all we have to do is pop off the bottom of the number plate holder, pull out the number plate, pull it out of the top lid and just simply flex it out. Get the motorhome number plate, tuck it in one side, tuck it in the other side. Push it into the top lid. There's two markers saying 110, 110. That's to hold the number plate up while you bet the bottom piece in. Two flanges, tuck it in one side, tuck it in the other side and simply snap it shut. And please remember to swap it back over before you drive the vehicle. Okay, so that's the legal side of it. Now what I'm going to do is show you how to take it off, and then we're going to put it back on and go through all the do's and don'ts. So the first thing we need to do is come round and pop the bonnet. Here, pull the inline socket out, lift the lid, pull out the plug and just tuck it down out of the way. Now, jockey wheels are a godsend, but they do need to come off for packaging purposes. So we need to remove the jockey wheel at this point. If you try and slide out the bar while the jockey wheel's on, with it being offset, it wobbles around, it just makes it awkward to do. So we're going to wind it down, make it as compact as possible, which helps when it comes to putting it back on. Support the A-frame with one hand, so when you release the clamp it doesn't drop onto your toes. I'm wedging the wheel so it doesn't run away, and just take the jockey wheel out of the equation and get into the habit of putting things straight back where they come from so we don't lose them or leave them behind. The brake cable would obviously have been connected at this point, but when we drive around I prefer to put them in here so it doesn't interfere with anything. So that would have been connected through the eyelet. Oops. Like so. And all we're going to do is 180 degree the clip, pull it out, and there's a little hole here to stow the cable when not in use. Like so. So now I'm going to straddle over it. I'm going to pull the linchpins out of the bobbin bar. So that's your fail safe. You can rotate the bar, as you can see, to remove it, and the washer also. Now it doesn't matter which way you go with the bar, right to left, left to right. They've put it in this way. I actually prefer to come in the other way. So I'm going to put the pins down here for now. Now the trick to this is to put 3 fingers in the end of the box, a finger and thumb either side. So when I take the bar out, my finger and thumb controls any wobbling that I might get. Gently take the weight to guide out the bar. Keep the arms in line with the eyes. If you lift it up, it just snags the bar. The trick is to keep them in line with the eyes all the way until the bar is out. Don't let go, she'll hit your bumper, hand on the body and step it away from the vehicle. So at this point we would be putting the washers and pins back on the bar for safekeeping. like so. The arms then fall back on themselves, 1 and 2. Wire, be careful of the bolts when you fold it back, make sure it doesn't get trapped. We can now get the bungee from inside the car to wrap up the A-frame with. When the arms bed in, they do get a little bit loose, so it just stops them flopping around banging your shins. But the main reason I like to wrap up the A-frame with the bungee is simply because I always know where it is. The bungee has a more important role as a return spring for the foot pedal when towing, which you will see in a short while. The best way to wrap it up is put it underneath from right to left. On the lightweight hitches there's a little hole here. Simply come from underneath and plug it in. With the heavyweight hitch, what we're using today, I simply put it into where the plug holder is there. Get the other end of the bungee, give it a really good stretch. Then where the breakaway should be coming through this hole here, I'm going to snap that into there, like so. Then the bar will tuck neatly underneath like so. Once you put that into its stowage point, usually a compartment or garage, or in your garage, the jockey wheel conveniently fits underneath, taking up no more room than the A-frame itself. So that's how we take it off and package it away. Now what we're left with, the towing eyes and the brake cable anchor. I've got to say 90% do leave them on. There's no sharp protruding edges, but when it comes around to MOTs or just for aesthetic reasons, they are designed to remove. However, you will need a 24mm spanner to do so. So you need to release the locking nut, half a turn, and then the whole towing eyes will unscrew just like a normal towing eye would. There's a tube spacer, which is a floating spacer, that will come out with it. So all it should leave is a little notch or hole in the grill where we've had to put it through. Now, if you do take the eyes out on a regular basis, we do white grease them to begin with, but periodically just spray a bit of white grease or get a bit of grease in the threads to stop any rust build up. Also, the original crash beam we do replace usually, and you get that back. In the Fiesta's case it's a little bit different, so there is the original towing eye in this one, but in most cars it was in the beam we've removed. So the threads on our eyes are different to the threads on a normal towing eye. So if you do take them out, always carry one of our towing eyes in the back for emergency breakdown purposes, just in case it's required, and you can use any of these to tow from in emergency. When putting the eyes back in, it's quite important that you put them in hand tight. Put the bobbin pin bar through both eyelets before tightening them up, because it's imperative that they're straight or you simply won't get the bar through. Now your brake cable, it is stainless steel and Teflon lined, so you do not need to lube it in any format. In fact, if you oil or grease that brake cable, it's the worst thing you could do. Grit from the road is going to stick to the oil. There is a seal in there, but eventually it could cut through the seal and let muck in and start sticking up the brake. So please note that the cable is maintenance free. Do not oil it, please. Now while we're on with the cable, how we attach the cable inside the vehicle is via a fork system, not too dissimilar to this, and we drill the pen and we put a quick release clevis pin in there with an R-clip. The reason for that was many years ago with the older vehicles, where the natural return spring built into the car's foot pedal gets weak at the latter end of its travel, and then us adding that cable to that pedal can be that little bit of resistance when you're driving the vehicle that the pedal doesn't fully release. If you are unlucky enough to experience that, then you are forced to remove it from the pedal when driving. Make sure there's nothing, it doesn't get under the pedal and can't trap it. It should flex to the side. And then when you're towing, you attach it, and as you'll see soon, the bungee goes around the pedal and will always ensure it'll pull it off regardless of whether it's sticking or not. Now it's very rare it happens, but it does happen from time to time. It's not car specific, it's just general wear and tear. We've done over 1,000 Fiat 500s, and to memory, probably 6 or 8 we've had to remove it, the rest have been fine. This particular vehicle is releasing perfectly fine, so you should be able to leave it on the pedal, but it's best you know in case it ever happens to you. Simple R-clip, pin out, nothing is then connected to the brake at all and shouldn't have any effect when driving in the braking system. Now if you do want to go the full hog and make it as neat as possible, you'll notice on this eyelet here there's some PVC tape. The brake cable is a bit like a push bike brake cable. It's actually a trailer cable by Knott, so you can purchase them throughout Europe if you ever needed. But it has a bobble on the end. This eyelet just hooks onto that bobble, so hence why there's tape on to stop it falling off. But if you remove the tape, you can remove the eyelet by pushing it down and pushing it in and down, and that will take off. If you then disconnect it from the vehicle inside the car, you can push the wire rope into that tube. There's an outer and an inner to the cable, so it won't come all the way out, it only travels so far. So it can be made to look really discreet with the eyes out and the cable disconnected. To get the cable back out, simply push it from inside, push it out and it'll bob back out again. Put your eyelet on, put some tape around it, and you're ready for towing. Right, so we're now going to put it back on. Get it from out of its storage point. Get your bobbin pin out. Put the linch pins, washer at the side you want to come in from, and the bar ready and waiting. As I say, it's your choice, left to right, right to left. Remove the bungee cable. I'm just going to put that in my pocket for now until we get to the point we need to put it on. Fold out the arms, one, make sure we don't trap any cables, 2, bring it in somewhere close, but not close enough that you're going to hit the bumper, straddle over, 3 fingers in the end of the box, thumb finger either side. This way I'm only hinging it, I'm not carrying all the weight. My thumb finger, as mentioned earlier, controls the wobble. The plate on the arms is identical to the towing eye. So all I'm going to do is work on the first eye, pull it in and line the plate up with the eye like so. I know that the hole is lined up without physically looking, so I can just put the bar through the first eyelet and guide it into the second eyelet. Now uncannily I'm quite close, but normally you might find yourself way off at this angle. So your little tip then is to swap your hands over, support the A-frame with the arm, with the other hand take the weight for a brief moment, swing it around, line the plate up with the eye, and the bar goes straight through. On with the washer, and then in with the main linch pin, ensuring that that snaps fully. Don't do this, you get a nasty bubbles if you do it wrong. But the linch pin will only snap shut one way. If you turn it the other way, although you can almost close it, it won't close it, it's going to come out. One of the reasons why we put a fail-safe pin in there, but please try and make sure it snaps shut. Now years ago, I used to give you a long shackle padlock instead of one of these. You put the padlock through, it acts as a fail-safe, but it also acts as a bit of a deterrent if you leave them in service stations or packed up unattended. I hope you have the common sense to remove the key from the ignition, of course, unless you've got a smart car that doesn't have a steering lock, and lock the vehicle up, but they can still steal the A-frame. So I do advise a lock. The only reason I've stopped giving it though, and what you need to be aware of, with vibration on the road, that bar can rotate. And many years ago on a smart car, the lock came round and put a chip on the bumper, and I was made liable, I'm afraid, so I've stopped giving it and just advise it. So what some people do is use reusable tie wraps, tie wrap the lock to stop it going round, sponge tape padding so if it goes round it doesn't damage anything, or simply put the lock in as and when stationary. For now, it's going to be a linch pin. We can now connect back up the brake. So remove it from its stowage point, Drop the pin through the eyelet, like so. Watch your fingers and just snap that shut, ensuring that that points downhill so it can't snag on the bar when braking. So always have it pointing downhill. We can now plug back in the electrics, pull out the socket, line up the slot with the internal notch so we don't mix the pins up, and simply tuck it down out of the way, like so. Now the idea with the cable is you have a central catch on the bonnet which does allow movement within the bonnet. The idea is we trap the wire in with the bonnet, which takes a little bit more persuasion when shutting it, but it will hold the wire and stop it chaffing on your paintwork. I'm not going to bother doing that now because we've got to take it all off. We're not towing this one away. So again, just a little bit more persuasion. You might get an indentation on the cable, but it'll never cut through it. So now we can then put back in the jockey wheel. If we made it compact when we took it off, we can do this at ground level when the wire's not in the way. Split the clamp, put in the jockey wheel with the wheel facing the vehicle. With one hand, hold the clamp tight circumference around the jockey wheel, so when you go in with this, with the handle, it's going in straight, you're not cross-threading it. One finger is all it should take, and we can then slide it up to the top. Make sure we can wind the handle, then nip the clamp up, holding the A-frame upright. Now to manoeuvre and drive the vehicle around as intended with the jockey wheel, that jockey wheel does need to rotate 360 degrees. So I'm just going to look from the side and wind it up until it misses the feet of the brake cable linkage. Give it a little test by holding it up, rotate the wheel and catching, so I need to go a bit higher. And there we go. So we're now in a position where we can drive the car around to its heart's content with the A-frame installed up to 10 mile an hour maximum. They meant really walking speed. So the beauty of that is you get on site, you can simply pull into your slot, unhitch the A-frame with the jockey wheel, put your vehicle alongside, take the A-frame off at your leisure. But there's two more important rules for having the jockey wheel. Don't know whether you've done your research with A-frame towing and reversing, although you can reverse in a straight line if you're very careful, you cannot reverse round a corner. So when reversing, the minute the car goes slightly out of line, what happens is the steering goes to opposite lock. If you continue to try and shunt that round a corner, it'll be like peeling the tyres off your vehicle, which is not going to do your car any good. So we strongly suggest avoid reversing at all costs, jump out of the cab, lower the jockey, drive the vehicle and motorhome round and hitch yourself back up again is the safest way to do it. If you're ever forced into that predicament and you do shunt it round a corner, although I say don't and use the jockey wheel, the problem with that, the sheer force that will put on your towing eyes is quite immense. The towing eyes are high tensile, which makes them extremely strong, but they are brittle. So that sideward shunting could airline fracture one of those towing eyes, and then hundreds of miles in, that fracture gets larger and larger until it breaks. So if you do ever do it, order a new set of eyes at the earliest convenience just to play safe. Okay? But again, don't do it. So the other main reason for the jockey wheel is getting it onto the tow bar in the first place. Reversing the motorhome up to it, even with cameras, is extremely difficult to do and very blind. So the easiest way to do it is simply to jump in the vehicle while sat in the driver's seat, a little peer over the bonnet, you can actually see the coupling area. And it's so easy just to drive the vehicle up and try and hover that above the ball. The trickier part is knowing when to stop, well, that just comes with practice, or someone guiding you onto the ball, looking down on the ball. When the coupling covers the ball, you know it's in line. At that point then, we can pull the trigger, pull up the handle, and it stays in the unlock position. We can then lower it down onto the ball, and if you've got it perfect, it will automatically lock and the green indicator pops up through the steel to let you know it's on. If it doesn't go down on its own, there is an element of movement in the A-frame, and with a damper, press down here, keeping your hands away from this because it will give you a nasty rap on the knuckles. Press down and that handle will auto lock. Okay, plug in your electrics, any excess wire curve round, but you do need a bit of slack for going around corners, of course. Jockey wheels are one of the biggest selling trailer components from people being a little bit lazy and only using the clamp to lift it up and down. All jockey wheels must be wound up to the maximum first and then slid up in the clamp second. In this case, you have two slots in the outer tube of the jockey wheel. What we need to do is wind the arms into the slots, which will then stop the wheel from rotating and unwinding itself. But don't just rely on that. The handle at the top, tap that in as well to stop that unwinding and the wheel lowering. Then at that point we can undo the clamp and slide the jockey wheel up out of the way like so and tighten the clamp, and again make sure the clamp is nice and tight. Now the breakaway cable, which is extremely important to have. It's 3 points if you don't have one. The idea of the breakaway cable, dread the thought they part a company or the ball broke or something like that. We need something to stop that vehicle rolling off into someone or something. It is a 3-point offence for not having one these days. So I also want you to pay attention to where we stow the hook of the breakaway cable, in the hole underneath the hinge bolt of the handbrake. The reason we stow that there is to stop you accidentally pulling it on. They're positioned this way by Alco for when they post them out so they don't get accidentally pulled on. How the handbrake works is it's just sprung loaded with a gas ram inside. If I disconnect that brake cable, and I did have a customer last Friday, his wife decided to pull it on while I was taking it off. But what happens, it will swing all the way over to this sort of an angle, and it's a real pig to get off. It's just hard work, press the button, push and pull. 2 people to get it off. So the golden rule is, you have a handbrake on the car, there's no need to pull this handbrake at all, and as a fail-safe, if we keep that hook in there, it will never flick on anyway. But it must be attached to the tow bar, obviously. So we can now, if it was hitched to a ball, remove the breakaway cable. This should be threaded through here and stay there once it's threaded through. Now the only other issue we have with this type of sprung hook, most tow bars these days have a hole for a breakaway attachment to clip into, but you should only clip carabiner style hooks into holes. If we put that directly into the hole, dread the thought the part of company, it's a possibility, but the hook could stretch and might not be enough force to flick on the handbrake as it's intended to do. So it needs to go through something around and hook back on itself like so. And it must be anchored close to the ball so it can't ride up anywhere. So when it pulls on the cable rather than the hook, usually snapping it, flicking the handbrake on, doing its job, stopping the car. So if you have a hole in your tow bar, we do have a D-link that we put through the hole, which will allow you to feed the cable through the D-link. So it's always the last thing I attach, and it's going to be the first thing I take off, come from behind, hook it into the hole, and I'm back into safe mode. Right, we're all hooked up and we're ready to go now. The most important thing of all, in my opinion, what I've just shown you is just the easiest way to install the coupling, and a few little pointers on what to look out for. The most important thing is safety checking. So we do put a safety checklist on your A-frame on an anodized plate, but we're now going to go into the car and do what we call a 3-touch check. All the steering lock is off, and then back the key all the way off. Everybody seems to think you need to leave it on accessory position. If you do leave it on accessory position, things run in the background, and on long distances it will have a drain on your battery. In some cases it can clock the mileage up. So if we back the key all the way off, the power will shut down on the vehicle. A little bit of a delay with the Fiesta, but it will shut itself down shortly, and then there's no drain on the battery. A lock will only engage when you remove the key. So again, it doesn't need to be an accessory. So check number one again: ignition, steering lock off, neutral gear, and handbrake off. And please physically check and don't rely on memory in itself. So now we've done a 3-touch check, I'm going to attach the bungee to the foot pedal just as a fail-safe precaution. So what I'm going to do now, and then we'll zoom in a little bit in a while, is I'm going to wrap this round the foot pedal, but the cable we've installed to the foot pedal, I'm going to feed it over that, so when it's around the pedal like so, it cannot drop down below and come off the pedal. So I've wrapped it around. Make sure it's not pulling on the R-clip or the pin and doesn't push the pin out. Use the slide bar of the seat to bring it forward, so we can simply click the carabiners onto the slide bar, and I'm going to use the seat to tension the bungee up as tight as you can get it. The pedal will still compress, and I'll make sure that pulls down. So at this point, make sure our windows are up, of course. If you have a secondary key, you can override and lock it up using the key on the door, providing you have one. The chances are the remote won't allow you to lock it, and if so, if you've got an alarm, when you tow it, it's going to set the alarm off anyway. So just override it and lock it via the key. A light check on every single journey, and we're on as merry way. The last check I want you to do now is a 1 to 3 mile safety check. Every journey out, between 1 and 3 miles if you can. 0.5 of a mile, 6 miles better than nothing, but 1 to 3 is ideal. I want you to pull over at a lay-by or somewhere safe to do so, and do another touch check. And what I like to do is start at the tow bar end. Make sure we're hooked on, we've got our green indicator. Our lights are in, not trailing on the floor or being pulled out. Breakaway cables are anchored with slack in the cable so it doesn't pull the handbrake on going around corners. Ensuring the handbrake is off, making sure the jockey wheel is tight, hasn't slipped. Make sure our pins are in, and then I'm going to feel the front rim and I'm going to feel the back rim of the car. If for any reason, not that it should ever happen, I can't remember when it has happened to be honest with you, but I'm just playing cautious. If something has gone wrong via the foot pedal braking the cable and you've forgotten to put the fail-safe bungee on for some reason, your first telltale sign will always be your front wheels, as vehicles, roughly speaking, brake 70 front, 30 back, so they're going to get hottest quickest. Now, if it's a nice warm day and it's took 3 miles before you could pull over, and I feel the front wheel and it's warm, that's actually a good sign. It's showing that the brakes are actually working. On a cold day, 1 mile, they might still be cold. But if you had an issue, within 1 mile, you would be scalding your fingertips, so they'd be that hot. But not hot enough to do serious damage like boil fluid and things like that. Now, the reason I touched the back wheel is simply because if I've forgotten to take my handbrake off, the rear wheels are going to be scalding hot and the front are going to be cool and warm. So always good practice to check both. The most common thing with this check, and been reported many times over, is people leaving the handbrake on because it's a habit. You don't realise you've done it most of the time. That 3-touch check will save all that trouble. You'll catch it before any serious damage is done. Yes, it might have worn your pads a bit unnecessarily, but it won't have warped your discs or alloy wheels, etc, etc. So basically that's how we put it on and off and all the safety checking. We have one last thing to do. If you don't bring your motorhome to us, you have to set up the brake cable itself. So I'm just going to put this to a rough ball height and show you how we do that. Now it's very important with a cable brake system that we leave slack in the cable. As it pivots at the front, which is one of the traits that make them tow superbly, along with the spread axle and its own self-steer, if I lift this up, you can see the cable gets taut and it starts to pull it a little bit. So that cable needs to be as loose as possible, but it does need to be braking the car. We do a little trick and we weld a component up underneath, which means the overrun part of the braking pulls twice as far as it usually would, which is what allows us to leave slack in the car, but it will still brake the vehicle. So when you set it up for the first time, have it on your tow ball, have the bungee on the foot pedal, because that will pull the pedal beyond its natural resting point, and then we can adjust the cable. So underneath you have a cable adjuster and some locking nuts. If you don't come with your motorhome and you're setting up yourself, then these nuts will be intentionally left loose to remind you to set it up. But if I draw a line from the tube to where it bolts on here, I want the cable to sag 2 inches below that line, which in effect is going to give me 4 inches of travel. So if I just turn the adjuster now anti-clockwise, it tensions the cable. Clockwise, as you can see now, is starting to loosen the cable as it basically pulls it in and out. So looking from the side, I would say that is more than tight enough and shouldn't affect you going up hills, humpback bridges, pulling the brake on, as it would if it was tight. So I'm now going to finger tighten the nuts up and we're going to test it. Once we know it's right, I get my 17mm spanner, hold the adjuster, nip those up so it can't readjust itself with vibration when towing. So what I need to do now is just go down the road, try to get to 25-30-ish, do a nice firm but steady brake. I don't want you to emergency stop, but when you brake it should be smooth, it should be effortless. You should barely know you've got this on the back. It tows and brakes that well. If it's not braking the vehicle, what will happen is the damper will collapse up so quickly, still have travel to go on the pedal, steel hits steel, and you get a terrible knocking noise, and you will definitely hear it up in the cab. Even on an American RV, echoes through the chassis. So if you get a knocking noise, we need to tension the cable up that little bit more. Try it again until the knocking noise stops. Another way, once you pull up abruptly, the damper should be collapsed up, meaning it's pulling the cable. So if I was then to go to your car, I shouldn't be able to push your car backwards. The brake should be firmly on. So that's another way of testing it when you've stopped. If the damper was halfway collapsed, I should have a tiny bit of resistance in the car and then it should roll back. So it's proportionate braking basically. The harder you brake with the motorhome, the harder this is going to brake. So that's another way of testing it. And that basically concludes the demo. Thank you very much.